If you've been in or around Ocean City over the past year or so, you've probably heard about the wind turbine project coming up. Now, in this video, I want to try my best to bring you not only the facts, but what I believe the impact will be to the island, to the real estate market, and so much more. So let's dive right in. Now, this is a little bit different of a topic than I normally cover, but again, to be respectful of the audience listening on their favorite podcast platform, or if you're watching this on YouTube, I want to bring something up to the surface that, again, a lot of people have been very loud about their support or against this particular thing, and I want to bring the facts. So let's start off with talking a little bit about what exactly is happening. So wind turbines are going to be running all the way from Stone Harbor to Atlantic City, and all of those will be completed by one particular developer, Ørsted. So Ørsted is a foreign company, and they have already, I believe it's 9 existing wind farm projects active in the United States. Most of those are onshore. But from an offshore standpoint, they are not the only company who has secured leases up and down the East Coast. So that particular thing, there is a sticking point at the moment with the transmission line. So if you have watched or seen OCNJ Daily, they are a great reporting source here for the island. And they wrote an article the other day that Ørsted has actually filed a lawsuit against Ocean City to try to force the permitting approval that would allow that transmission line basically to take the power from where it's being generated over to Beasley's Point. They wanted to run that through 35th Street. That'll be bored well under the beach. It will cross at the bridge. So there's a lot that needs to happen from a government approval standpoint, both on a state, county, and local level in order for that to happen. Ørsted's basically saying, hey, look, Ocean City hasn't done what they were supposed to do. They're holding up the process. They're going to delay the project. So here we are in May, and this is expected to go live or be online in 2024. Now, obviously, if there are delays, and that could be pushed. But at this juncture, right, without going deep into the political history of this, Ocean City doesn't really have a whole lot of a say. This has been forced on a state level. So despite local opposition, which is very strong, up and down, not just Ocean City, but again, those other shore points as well, it seems likely that this is going to go forward, and it's more of a formality. Now, again, I'm not a politician. I don't have any inside knowledge, but that is what I gather of the situation. But there are some groups out there that are doing, I'll say, fighting the good fight, right? And really, really trying to do everything they can to make sure that this does not happen. But with that out of the way, I want to spend most of this video talking about how Ocean City will be impacted. It's one of the questions I get most frequently from people who are considering buying here or considering selling here. And that's really something I'm going to spend a lot of time on today. So one of the most prevalent arguments against this, obviously the environmental case is fairly clear, but I digress from that. I'm going to stick with the other aspects of this as well. So there's speculation that property values are going to go down, right? There's no longer going to be this clear line all the way to the horizon that you look out over the beach. And I've seen in reports, right, from Ørsted that there's going to be, if you're standing on the beach, you'll see 4 pennies stacked on each other. Now, whether that is they're stacked on each other and they're flat, or if they're standing end to end, I'm not entirely sure. There have been renderings by artists, by engineers, and all of them seem to be different. So honestly, what the reality is going to be, I do not know. I can't say for sure. And usually the truth lies somewhere in the middle of what either side of any argument is saying. However, what I am is a data nerd, right? And if you've been following my channel, you know that about me. And if you haven't decided to follow, again, whether it's on your podcast platform or on YouTube, I would appreciate you following along for the journey, because I love talking about this stuff. And I try to bring facts to the surface, not just emotions. So I went back and looked at several studies that were done all up and down, not just the East Coast, but foreign as well. And I'm talking looking at different wind projects all offshore. I could care less at the moment about any onshore projects and how those property values are impacted, but offshore specifically. And not one study did I find that found any conclusive evidence of any material or statistically significant, is the key term that kept coming up. No statistically significant decrease in property values after the windmills or wind turbines are in place. So that in and of itself, is pretty strong evidence to me. Now, did I look into the source of these studies? I know anyone who is super against this project is probably thinking, well, who were those studies paid for, right? Well, these were done through universities. These were done through private companies. I tried to sample a little bit of everything, but all of them had the same conclusion. And they were all different parts of the country, again, different parts of the world, different proximity. The closest I want to say was about 12 miles out from shore, the furthest being about 35. So all of them came to the same conclusion. So will this be different? I'm inclined to think not. Now, the second argument that I hear about, well, if people can't see that clear horizon line, and there is a beauty to that, don't get me wrong, I love it. I walk the boardwalk every day and I admire it. But if people can't see that, right, if people are staring at this big industrialization of the ocean, they're going to stop coming, right? And that's going to drive down everything, rents, property values, everything you can think of. My counterpoint or my counter question to that has been, where are people going to go, right? While I don't have specific data points for this, the overwhelming majority of people who come to Ocean City and the South Jersey shore points are from the surrounding area. That's the tri-state area, more specifically the Philly suburbs, and most of South Jersey, right, will come to these shore points. And it's because of proximity. Obviously, Ocean City stands out as a gem among all the other islands. They're all unique in their own ways and have their own benefits, but Ocean City is simply different. That's because it's a dry town. It's because it's a family-friendly town. The list goes on. However, number one, if people are going to stop vacationing in Ocean City, they're probably not going to stop vacationing entirely. And people who tend to come to Ocean City are drawn to the beach, not necessarily the mountains, right? So won't they just go to another beach town? Well, you have to first assume that people are going to get over the hurdle of the differences in culture and experience that you get in these surrounding beach towns. And there's nothing like Ocean City. That's point number one. Point number two is that, and I'm going to share my screen here for a second. Obviously, again, if you're listening to this, you're not going to see it, but I would encourage you to hop on YouTube to find this, because I looked up exactly what the East Coast landscape is going to look like as far as wind farm projects, either in the works, active, or leases that have been, put up for auction or have been leased. So right here, I have the map of at least the state of New Jersey. You can see a little bit off of Rhode Island, as well as Massachusetts. And Massachusetts is going to be the largest area by far because of the wind capacity that's there. But we have it off of Massachusetts. We have it very close to Block Island, which is much closer than we're going to be to shore here. But all of these different areas, and you can explore this website at your leisure. I don't want to dive too deep into this, but basically, if we start going down the coast, number one, we are basically covering almost the entire South Jersey coast in some capacity within that 15 to 20 mile range, up to essentially Seaside Heights. So you're either going to have to go to Seaside Heights or further north if you want to get away from it entirely, or you could make the case that down, got to get used to the site again. If you go further south towards Cape May County, really towards Cape May Point, then you can argue that they may not be as much of an issue down there, but they will still be present. They will still be out there. Now, again, other surrounding areas. Well, hey, if people are driving an hour or two or three, what's another couple hours to drive? Well, let's look what's happening off of Delaware, off of Maryland, and off of Virginia, right? This is not just a New Jersey event. As much as it's easy to be focused on what's happening in our backyard, this is a much grander scale. And basically, you would have to make a bet, and I'm not willing to make that bet, that residents, that second homeowners, that renters are going to all of a sudden change their habits entirely. And again, almost anyone I talk to, there's two things that draw them here. It is memories and nostalgia, and it's convenience, right? The memories and nostalgia, you can't replace that. You have to make new ones. You have to break old habits and patterns, which is very hard to do from a human psychological standpoint. Number two is the convenience, right? As the dad of a 6-year-old and soon to be baby girl, 6-year-old son and soon to be a baby girl, getting on a plane and going on vacation is not my favorite thing to do. It's a big to do, it's a stressor, and it's not fun, and it's expensive. So how many people are going to be willing to change those patterns, right, and go further south, right? We're talking to Florida, we're talking to other parts of the world, other parts of the country that won't have anything like this at the moment. I don't think it's going to be that large of a percentage of people. For me, again, I look at this as a temporary inconvenience. And I know, again, this is controversial. There are probably some of you who are going to say, you know what, I'm done with this guy, right? He's taking the wrong stance or not taking a strong stance. But I view this as something that is coming. It's coming. And fighting the good fight is the right thing to do. But it's also about accepting the possibilities that are to come and start to think through what that future might look like. That's my job, right? To be an advisor to people who trust me on whether to buy or sell a property here in Ocean City. So my guidance and advice is, let's look at the bigger picture. Again, do we think that people are going to break their habits in large enough scale to have a material impact here? Well, the studies that I found and researched did not support that. And number two, again, knowing our local demographics of who comes to Ocean City and where the support comes from. Do we think people are going to forego the beach nearly entirely, or add an extra hour or so to their drive in traffic to get down to Cape May Point, or going up to Seaside or other areas of the shore? And that's simply highly unlikely. I don't believe that's going to happen. So it is a concern, right? This is going to change the landscape in Ocean City, and a lot of people don't do well with change. Embracing change is something that I've come to terms with over my long yet short life at the same time at 34 years old. But we have to stay based in reality. And there's going to be an adjustment period. And I think, like anything, human beings tend to have a pretty short-term memory on the whole. And there's going to be an adjustment period for this sometime in 2024, assuming this all comes to fruition. But after that, there's still going to be the, hey, you know what? It's not like it was. And it's true, it's not going to be like it was, but it's going to be something that I think will become a part of our city, a part of our town. And hopefully there will be some benefits to be had. So that is my take on the coming wind farm project in a nutshell. And I hope you found this helpful. If you weren't aware of this, there are a lot of information sources out there that you can find. I would just be very cautious because there's a lot of misinformation. I would argue there's a lot more misinformation than there is accurate information. So I don't have one source I can necessarily point you to, but I would just encourage you to take everything with a grain of salt and kind of gather your own opinion based off of the facts that you find. So if you have any questions on this, Ocean City real estate, or anything Ocean City, you can always reach out to me. Again, my information is in the description of the YouTube video, and it should be in the show notes or somewhere in the podcast that you can find. But I appreciate you hanging out with me for this episode as always, and I will see you on the next one.